Welcome to the SwimSwam podcast. I'm your host, Coleman Hodges. Joining us today, NBC's own frontline reporter from the 2022 World Championships in Budapest. We're sitting down today with Nick Zaccardi. Nick, how's it going, man?
Hey, that's quite the introduction. Thank you very much, Coleman. It's a pleasure to finally be on the podcast. Long-time listener and watcher here.
My heart very happy to hear. I'm glad you've enjoyed it and glad to hear you're listening. I see you at meets a lot, and we've interviewed a lot of the same athletes throughout the years, and so it's great to connect with you on here. I know you were in Budapest initially to just report the meet, but you ended up being NBC's on-camera personality as well. Can you tell me how that came to be and just a little bit about the experience itself being on that other side of the camera?
Yeah, no, it was a really, really cool experience. And I was originally only going there to write, which is what I normally do, kind of my 40-hour-a-week job. And then sometime in May, I would say, I got a call and said, hey, while you're there, would you mind doing interviews for the broadcast too? And I said, like, of course, whatever I can do to, help our overall coverage, I'll do. I said, just one thing. I have almost no experience doing this on camera live. I've done a lot of interviews. So they're like, oh, it's all right. You'll be fine. So that's kind of went from there, and it ended up being quite an experience. I have a newfound respect for anybody that has to do live interviews, whether it's TV or streaming or any sort of thing, or even live podcast interviews. It definitely takes an interesting skill set.
Yeah. So as someone who does that sometimes, I'm just curious about kind of the learning curve that you had from day 1 to day 8. What do you feel like you picked up or gained along the way as you kind of got into a rhythm and got further and further into the meet?
Yeah. So it was pretty interesting. I mean, it was like being thrown right into the deep end, to use a pool analogy. I think what really helped was actually the day before the meet started, we did a lot of sit-down interviews with a lot of the U.S. swimmers in a hotel room, which you may have seen on the broadcast with sort of like little short features or whatever. So that kind of helped me get a little more comfortable. I wasn't on camera for those, but there was a camera there. And, just to see a lot of the swimmers who I've seen, most of the veterans, as you said, at being in a lot of meets and other NBC shoots, I'm pretty comfortable with them. But it was the first time that I had actually like been at, an event on site since the pandemic, actually. So I met like Claire Cruzan for the first time and Tori Husk for the first time. I talked to them on the phone before, but so that really helped me get comfortable. And then like we have incredible producers. They were back in Stanford, but they were in my ear the whole time. And then we had a sound guy and a video guy who are based in Europe, who are on site with me, and they've got like decades of experience doing all sorts of different sporting events. So they were kind of like holding my hand through a lot of things. But I would say as it went through, as the meet went on, I got a lot more comfortable being on camera, of course, a lot more in a rhythm of kind of, the kind of questions that you need to ask when you're doing these short 2 or 3 question TV interviews right after a race. It's a little bit different than the type of questions you would ask, like in a mix zone or if you're writing an article so yeah. And then just like, it's pretty incredible doing the TV interviews, because like you see them get out of the pool and it's like, boom, they're like right there 30 seconds later. And it's like, so sometimes I don't know what my questions are going to be until we find out what happens in the race. And now I've got like 30 seconds to like digest everything that happened. And okay, boom, boom, boom. These are the 3 questions I have to have for Ryan Murphy or whatever, based on this that just happened. It's like, you can only do so much prep work, right? Until you find out somebody broke the world record or whatever. You just like, So it's you really had to be on my toes a lot, and I made some rookie mistakes for sure, but it was an incredible experience. It really was.
So on that note, can you kind of put us on deck with you? What were some of those highlight moments, either or memorable moments for you, either when you made some of those mistakes, or just the situations of like, you know, when Hunter Armstrong gets crowned world champion because Justin Rest DQs, and then 20 minutes later we find out that it gets overturned.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I don't mind sharing some of the rookie mistakes that I had, just because I'll always remember them. And like, again, since I was a rookie, I don't think anybody's going to blame me for this, but I think maybe it was the second day I accidentally left my credential on for the first interview. Maybe the first day I left an AirPod in. Like I was listening to the producers with AirPods, and I think I left my AirPod in that was the wrong ear. So it was the ear that was being shown on camera. So you could see I had an AirPod in. So it looked like I was listening to music while I was interviewing the athletes or whatever. So like, it was, you know, again, I've never done these things, and it was just like, you know, it was a lot of things to remember that I just wouldn't go through my mind when I'm doing, you know, print interviews or whatever. But it's funny that you mentioned the Hunter Armstrong thing, because that was a really interesting case. So of course I'm there, I'm watching the race, and we see the finish, and it's like, oh, US, you know, 1-2, you know, okay, that's, you know, great. We get both of them for an interview together. It's, you know, like, again, like whenever the US finishes like 1-2, it makes my job really easy, because everyone's happy, you know, and you get to talk to two different people and get two different perspectives on the race. And obviously Hunter and Justin have great sort of backstories. And then, you know, you see it was pretty quick DQ. I think for a race, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. And so it went from getting Justin and Hunter together to just being, okay, well, Justin is like escorted off somewhere else, I guess, to like start the appeal process. I'm not sure. And Hunter comes over. And so my question of the first thing, I got to ask Hunter just basically like, what's happening? What do you know? Like, you know, that sort of thing. That was my first question to him. And I'm not sure if this interview made air because of how crazy things I'm getting with it all. But, and, you know, Hunter was like, he had a great answer about how, you know, basically he didn't want to win a gold medal this way, and, you know, that whole thing, Justin deserved it. But from then on, for the next hour, was me running around talking to FINA people, talking to USA Swimming people, you know, trying to figure out like where the appeals process was, like, you know, can we get a final answer on this before the show is over, you know, because we want to get the viewers the latest information. And so I kept getting different responses from different people, basically like, the summary was, it's going to be over. The appeal is going to be successful. It's going to be overturned. I'm like, well, that's not good enough. I need like, is it overturned, right? Like, we can't be like, you know, right? So, and it was like text messaging, talking to people in person. Like literally there was a FINA official like right next to me in the mix zone. Basically, I think they told him like, hey, that's the USA TV reporter. So he's the first person that you want to tell once we have it official, so they can get on their air since it's an American swimmer. And so there was a guy right there. And so it was just like, it was just crazy. And it just kind of taught me that like, when I see all the different people doing the, you know, the sideline interviews on TV, various sports, they're not there just doing interviews. They're like reporting news and trying to find out information and stuff like that. Like that day for me, most of my time was spent running around talking to different people, you know, that wasn't on camera, and only a fraction of it was the actual on camera news. So basically, long story short, we get the final answer. It's overturned. I think we got the final answer like after it had changed on the Omega live timing that he had been reinstated anyway. So at that point, it's like, okay, like it's got to be official. And so they had to have a second medal ceremony. So we weren't able to talk to Justin until after the TV window ended. And we did end up talking to him. And I'm not sure if it made the NBC highlight show, but we did talk to him and Hunter together. And it was probably my favorite interview of the entire meet. But that was definitely the most memorable, like, single experience of it all, was just that whole craziness. I'm sure it was memorable for lots of people trying to follow it too, because it was, you know, it was just crazy, insane.
Yeah, I know we were doing a live stream during it, and, you know, just getting the live updates of like, oh, Justin won. Oh, he's DQ'd. Oh, you know, like they're appealing it, and then it gets overturned. I mean, I feel like it happened relatively quickly just from our side of getting those updates, because I think we got a similar message of like, they're appealing it, and then we think it's going to get overturned. And I think also we had like commenters in the live stream section who were in Europe, so like they were ahead of us.
Okay.
So anyway, so it's like went pretty quick for us, but I can imagine that was a wild time being a reporter being on deck, trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I imagine that maybe some of the European TV stations, they might have ran with it, before we would have. Like, I don't know what their standards would have been. Like, we were pretty much like, it's got to be like rock hard, 100%, definite. And if, again, they were telling other TV stations it's going to be overturned, they might have just turned around and said that, which we weren't really, we didn't want to say that until we had something official. So it's pretty funny. And we were right next to like Swedish TV, and Swedish TV is like asking me like, is it going to be overturned or whatever? Because again, like, we're the American TV station, so I guess we're the ones who are supposed to know this first. But it was just it was wild. And again, like, when you're writing these things, it's like you're basically, okay, I'll just wait for the process to play out, right? Like, there isn't like a hard deadline really. Whereas when you're on TV, it's like, yeah, like the broadcast is over at this time. We don't want to leave people wondering what's going to happen. We need an answer now. And so I felt like I had to be a little more, persistent with people than with writing, because again, we had this kind of like, like, this is something we had to have, that sort of thing. At least I felt that way. I wasn't being pressured, but I put my reporter hat on, and it was really important to get. So again, and everybody came through. So the producers are great, and Fina was great. Eventually, getting something all done. And I'm glad he was able to get, the medal ceremony and everything, especially that for Justin. So it was pretty crazy.
I actually just spoke to Justin recently, and kind of, rehashed that whole scenario. And it was great getting his perspective. I'm curious what made his interview with Hunter and Justin together, what made that one the best one for you, obviously, aside from just the situation?
Yeah. Well, obviously it starts with Hunter, and his message in both the interviews that we did with him was basically like, yeah, like, I don't want to win a gold medal this way. And like, basically like, Justin is the gold medalist to me, is basically, what his sentiment was. And so to hear him say that right next to Justin too, was, I can feel the kind of spine tingling right now, just remembering it. And then Justin, talking to him, just asking him like, what does this mean to you in the context of your career? And you talked about considering retirement, I believe. And, he's been at this for a while. I think he made his world's debut in Budapest, 5 years earlier, and missed the medals in the 50 back. So to come back, after 5 years, missing an Olympic team and to come back and get it, and then just have to go through all that craziness with the DQ and the appeal and all that. Like, it was, you could tell it was really, really an emotional time for him. So it was, those two things combined, having it involve two people, and then just his backstory, I felt like made it pretty incredible. Because I mean, like, Katie's great, but she always wins gold medals. Like, this was like a ho-hum meet for Katie, right? But this was like something totally unique for Hunter and Justin. So it's pretty special.
Yeah. So in terms of just your work with NBC, you cover a lot of different sports, not just swimming. So when you come to a big swim meet like this, and the kind of the penultimate meet of the year, is it different than covering another sporting event? Do you have to get in a certain mindset, or do you have to prepare yourself in certain ways, obviously, other than just, the research that goes into this sport versus another sport?
That's a good question. Each sport kind of has their own uniqueness about it. And obviously, like, for swimming, you guys do an incredible job. I mean, no matter if I'm covering it on site or not, I go through and read every single SwimSwam event preview. And now, since you guys have started the podcast since the pandemic, I listen to or watch all the podcasts. But yeah, there's two different parts of it. There's like sort of like the personality sort of backstory angle, which everybody that is kind of synonymous with NBC and that whole thing. And then there's like the analytical statistics time sort of angle, which is always going to be present in swimming because it's all about time. So I kind of research things in both senses when I can. So, if I'd been solely writing this meet, I would have focused probably more on like the personal stories. And I wrote a story on Leah Hayes and her backstory before the meet. That was kind of the one sort of deep dive-ish sort of story I did. But then when it came to TV, every day I would come to the arena hours beforehand. I'd start going through, race by race. Okay, these are the sort of like statistics times, missed medal history sort of storylines with each of these races and each of these swimmers. Because like with these TV interviews, like it's like short bites, right? You know, I'm not asking somebody for their life story in these interviews. It's basically like, how was your race? And then one or two more questions on the context of the race. Like, you know, Tori Huss getting 6 medals and only a few women have done that, or Ryan Murphy's first individual world title, like, you know, different things like that. So, I'm a numbers person, so I really enjoy that aspect of it. But at the same time, you know, there's people behind the numbers too, right? So it's figuring out a good balance of both.
I like that you said you kind of balance those two things, because I think a lot of people get into sports for that numbers aspect, right? But then maybe a lot of people get into journalism for the personality aspect, or a combination of both. But it's great to combine those and see both for what they are, and get to report and tell stories about both, which is really neat. I'm just kind of curious about your other experience. Do you have a favorite sport to cover in the NBC sphere or Olympic sphere?
I don't think I have one favorite sport. I like to tell people that what I do, I try to mirror as best I can what our primetime show during the Olympics is. So for summer, I'm basing most of my time in swimming, track and field, gymnastics, and maybe a little bit of beach volleyball, diving. And for winter, it's figure skating, alpine skiing. Do I have a favorite among those? So swimming and track and field, I like them both a lot for kind of the same reasons. Like, you've got the time aspects of it, very easy to kind of follow in that aspect. And then obviously the personal stories are there too. Gymnastics can be a little bit tougher. There isn't as much of a, it's a judge sport, so it's not by time, and there's fewer athletes, and it's more cyclical. You don't have as many athletes sticking around for 4 or 5 Olympics, and so it's harder to develop relationships with the people you cover. So that's a little bit tougher. And then, the winter sports are different because so many of them, they're outside, they're the weather, the cold and everything. And you don't get as good of a sort of up close and personal aspect of it when you're dealing with skiers and bobsledders or whatever, because they're wearing helmets, or you're separated from them a lot. So yeah, swimming, track, and gymnastics are kind of the three. I grew up, I was in high school, college when Phelps was kind of doing his thing. And so that was like watching those Olympics. It was, all Phelps all the time. So it's hard not to be influenced, by that a whole lot. So swimming is up there, but I couldn't say I could pick one.
How much autonomy do you have in terms of, do you get to choose what you cover to an extent at all?
I feel like I have a lot more autonomy than a lot of writers, I would say. Obviously, there's a lot of collaboration there's like so many different departments at NBC that have their hands in the Olympics, right? So based on what time of year it is, what sport it is, that sort of thing, I'm talking to different people, producers, researchers, editors with the website. But when the Olympics are happening, it's completely different than when the Olympics aren't happening. When the Olympics are happening, I'm much more of kind of like one piece of a puzzle. And when the Olympics aren't happening, I'm kind of like, I'm our main point person for all of our written digital coverage of Olympic sports. So when the Olympics aren't happening, there's a lot more autonomy. Yeah, I feel like over the years have gone by. I've been at NBC 9 years now. People come to trust me a lot more with, deciding what's newsworthy, what's newsworthy for NBC when it comes to the Olympics, because since we are the Olympic network, so we are going to be covering things differently than say ESPN or other people, because we have relationships with these athletes and these national governing bodies, and you have to take that into consideration. I've got a hard news background, but I also understand that we have relationships. So you kind of have to toe those two things. So yeah, first couple of years, there were some times where I have some conversations with people and be like, this is, again, we've got relationships and we have to, I was at Sports Illustrated before, so you're not writing for Sports Illustrated anymore. You're writing for NBC now. So, but as time has gone on, we've gotten in a really good rhythm and sync, and it's allowed me to branch out to do like something I just did in Budapest, which is helping out with the TV broadcast. And I like being able to be part of the kind of the greater team of the broadcast in any chance that I get, because that's where most of our people are. We don't have as much of a year-round digital Olympic presence. When the games are happening, we've got a lot of people. When they're not, it's not as much. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Is this a role that you had pursued for a long time, or that you saw yourself in for a long time, or is this, I guess, as a sports journalist or as an Olympic sports journalist, or is this something that you kind of more fell into?
That's a good question. I guess I hadn't really pursued it. I have always been on the lookout for ways that I can contribute to a broadcast, and I don't know, if you had asked me like a year ago or even 5 years ago, I probably would have said I'd be more interested in helping out off camera than on camera, like, with research, or interviewing people off camera, things like that nature. But at the same time, I'd be like, but I'm also interested in any way that I can help. So, again, this thing sort of like kind of fell into my lap, and I'm just glad that they trusted me to say, yeah, like you can do the interviews. Like, we know you, that sort of thing. Like, they acted like it wasn't a big deal, but to me, it was a big deal, because I watch the Olympics and I see, Andrea Kramer, Lewis Johnson, Andrea Joyce, like all these people that are, have been doing this job for a long time, and I'm doing this job that they're doing now. I'm not saying that I'm as good as them, but it's like, that's, they're important part. They have important roles in NBC Olympics. So, yeah, I mean, I was excited just that they asked me to do it, honestly. And, as I was doing it, I thought to myself, this is the most challenging thing that I've done in 9 years at NBC. And I don't know how good of a job I'm doing, but at the same time, I just love that I have this challenge, and it just made me think I want to do whatever I can do that's going to challenge me in this job at NBC. And if that's more of doing this, if that's what they want me to do, then sign me up. But at the same time, I don't want to feel like entitled, like I just did this, I should get to do more of this. Like if I go back and talk to people at NBC, I'd be like, yeah, like give me more challenges, whatever you can give me that's a challenge, that's what I want to do. And then, give me feedback, like, how am I doing? So that's kind of the way I look at it. I never went into sports journalism wanting to be on TV. Like, that wasn't something I thought of. I was a writer, and that's kind of what it was. And I loved the Olympics, and 12 years ago, I found a way to freelance the Olympics as a writer right out of college, and one thing led to another, and now I work in the Olympics. So it's pretty crazy.
It is pretty crazy. So how many Olympics have you worked at to date?
10 to 40. I've done 5. I didn't do Tokyo because my son was born a week before the games, so I was on parental leave. And then I worked the Beijing Winter Olympics, but I wasn't on site. So some people count that. I don't count that, but I mean, I worked it. I worked really hard, but and I was part of a great team for that. But I've done 5 on site, 3 on site with NBC, and I was at Sports Illustrated before that and freelancing before that. So 2 summer games on site, London and Rio. And London was incredible. Rio was all right, I guess, but London was, that was my first summer. So that was the best.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite Olympic memory or moment from any of them that, or just moments that stand out to you in terms of good memories or bad memories, I guess?
Good or bad memories. That's a question. I'll keep it to swimming. Trying to think in London. To me, the stuff that really sticks with me and it's sort of like those awestruck moments are more so like the other journalists that are around, because I see like, oh, that guy, like he's written for Sports Illustrated for decades. He's incredible. Like, I read him all the time. More so that than the athletes. But in London, I just remember I got to be at the swimming venue a few times, and just like how noisy it was and how crowded it was, and being all the way up in the seats. And I remember like looking and seeing like Missy Franklin's parents, and they didn't have great seats either. They had almost as bad seats as I did, and just thinking how crazy that was. She was such a big star at those games. Rio, I didn't do a ton of swimming in Rio. I did more gymnastics there. And swimming in Rio. I remember, like, again, it's mostly the journalistic thing. So I remember in Rio, Ledecky did her last swim, and she was going, they gave her like a one-on-one interview with, I think, the Washington Post or Sports Illustrated or something. And I'm like thinking, oh, I've got to get something really good on Ledecky now, because they're going to get something really good from one-on-one interview. So I go and I talk to Bruce Gemmell, her coach, and he's like in tears because he knows it's their last meet together, right? And just telling me all these stories about her and that sort of thing. And I wrote a story based off that, and so that was particularly memorable because I talked to Bruce a few times before, and like you probably talked to him, like he's incredible, he's so great. That was probably my favorite moment of Rio. But yeah, I mean, I just remember watching, like, even things I didn't attend, like the 2009 World Championships in Rome. I wasn't there, but I remember watching on TV and watching them meet and being like, that's where I want to be. That's what I want. Because I was 1 year out of college. I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to have a job where like I'm covering these Olympic athletes, even when the Olympics aren't happening. Like, Rome is an incredible place too, right? And that venue was so great. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. And that's, then like what, 6 months later, I was at a Winter Olympics, and 2 years after that, I started working for NBC. So it's it's pretty crazy. Yeah, that's kind of the swimming tie-ins that I can think of.
Yeah, that's really great. I love hearing that little mini origin story of the 2009 World Champs, because that was a crazy meet. I remember watching it in high school on TV and just being like, what is happening here?
All the world records, yeah, and just like. Yeah, like, and like Phelps, like going with the suit after he took the world record back from Cabbage or beat him or something like that. And there were so many crazy stories. Federica Pellegrini at that meet, and just like that outdoor venue they had was so incredible. Yeah, like I don't know how anybody could watch that meet and not be like, like a swimming fan for the rest of their lives. It was so great.
Yeah, I mean, and plus, like, anytime someone jumped in the pool, world record. So it was just like so exciting, just from the aspect of, this is literally the fastest meet that's ever happened in history. Like almost every world record got broken there. It was quite a time.
Yeah.
So just looking forward now, with world champs in swimming over, you're still in Europe. So what does your job hold for you now and for the rest of the summer?
Yeah, so I'm going home shortly, but the rest of the summer, so we've got the World Track and Field Championships coming up, and they're in the U.S. For the first time ever. Swimming Worlds have never been in the U.S., have they? Just short course, I think.
I think short course was once in 2004, but I don't think long course has ever been. Yeah, so
that's obviously a very big deal for us. I won't be there. But we'll have a huge team there. That's part of the reason why I actually requested Swimming Worlds this year instead of Track Worlds, because I was like, well, we're gonna have a ton of people at Track Worlds. We'll probably have another writer there. But I don't know if we'd have a lot of people at Swimming World, so it might be more valuable if I'm there, and that's what ended up happening. But so that starts July 15th, and that's a 10-day meet. So that's a really big deal for us. And also, I mean, I also kind of run our coverage of things like the Tour de France on Olympic Talk, our blog. So it's not just like what you think of as Olympic sports, but like anything that's sport that's in the Olympics, we kind of have a hand in. So that's kind of July. And then gymnastics national championships are always in August, and gymnastics world championships are like October, November. So it's kind of funny the way the summer sports season works. Usually swimming, track and field, gymnastics are all kind of broken up. So like, okay, this week is a swimming week, this week's a track week, this week's a gymnastics week, whether it's national championships, world championships, or like a pro series, a Grand Prix sort of thing. They're usually broken up, but swimming, with the change in schedule this year, the Swimming Worlds were the same. They shared a weekend with track and field national championships. So the last weekend of Swimming Worlds, I was finishing my work there, coming back to my hotel, and then watching the track and field national championships and kind of helping our coverage of that. So those were like marathon days. But yeah, that's the brunt of the swimming season is over. We still have nationals in Irvine. We'll cover those too. But we've got the big things are track and field and gymnastics coming up. And then then it's like right into like the winter sports season in October. Figure skating and alpine skiing start up, and there's other things that happen. There's already Olympic qualifying tournaments happening right now, actually in soccer this week, which is crazy to think. So there's always Paris 2024 on the horizon in different sports and different people qualifying. Commonwealth Games, there's always stuff you got to track. Something could happen. With Commonwealth Games, the Aussies are probably going to set a world record somewhere. So there's always something going on. Yeah,
I'm curious. What will your coverage look like for Commonwealth Games?
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of it's dependent on what else is going on in the Olympic sports world at that time. So it's late July, early August. So that might actually be a decent time because track worlds will be over and gymnastics nationals I don't think will start until they're over. So it's the sort of thing where I'm looking for something that is going to have an impact on the Olympics. So again, like Aussie swimmers, they're going to be big come the Olympics. Okay, great. So it's something like that. Honestly, swimming is the biggest sport in the Commonwealth Games because the top track athletes generally don't go. The gymnastics top countries aren't Commonwealth countries. So I'm mostly watching the swimming, but and again, you're looking for, I'm honestly also looking for kind of just interesting, unique sort of stories. There are some sports at the Commonwealth Games that are just out there, not a part of the Olympics. I'm thinking lawn bowls is one of them. So if a cool story pops up in something like that, sure, throw it in there, look at it. So and just I like the Commonwealth Games. I like the international aspect of it. It's kind of like a mini Olympics. You can debate what you want over whether you think the Aussies should be prioritizing them over Worlds, but they happen once every 4 years and Worlds are once every 2 years. So, I'm sure you guys are going to blow it out a lot more than I will, as you guys usually do. But I'll probably be watching swimming more than anything else, like I said, because a lot of the big stars are there. So.
Yeah, and that's the big thing for us, right? Is that people really, so at least the swimmers in the Commonwealth, really turn out for Commonwealth Games, and so if the Aussies are putting us on world record watch, we got to be there, or metaphorically, we got to cover it. So that's really great intel. And just a great perspective to get on a broader Olympic sphere. One final question is that I'm really curious on your thoughts of 2024 U.S. swimming Olympic trials being in Lucas Oil Stadium.
That's pretty cool. I've been to one trials. Again, I would have gone last year if my wife wasn't 9 months pregnant at the time. So I stayed home for that one. But I went to the one in 2016. And again, watching the trials on TV, in 08 and 12 when I was college and coming out of college, it was just you watch it and you see the fire things coming up for the intros and that whole thing. And it looks really cool. And in person, it was just like that. It was incredible. And I loved that it was in Omaha, in a place where it was the big show in town, right? The College World Series is going on at the same time, but it was still, it felt like it was the biggest thing there. I think it'll feel that way in Indianapolis too. Indianapolis, they do a good job hosting other Olympic sports events. They've hosted gymnastics nationals, they've hosted track and field nationals. So it'll be interesting to see what it's like in a football stadium. It's going to be a unique experience for sure. I'm just wondering, what the sound's going to be, right? That's sort of the big thing. And the atmosphere and all that certainly be different than anything else I've ever experienced at a swim meet. So I'm really looking forward to it in that aspect. Omaha did an incredible job. Part of me is sad for it to not be there, but then another part of me is this is good that it's they're trying something new, they're trying something different. It's always good to change it up, I feel like. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping that we'll see Ledecky in the 200 free there. We'll see. At the Olympic swimming schedule might base our decision off that. But I think it's been pretty incredible. Hope to be there.
Same. Yeah. Talk about, Olympic trials is already a swim meet that's pretty unlike anything else. certainly in the US. And so to have it in a full-blown football stadium should be pretty unique, if nothing else.
And the mix zone at trials is always like incredibly unique, because you see the people who finish third and that sort of thing. Like you see people puking in the trash buckets and all this stuff. It's like, I mean, they always say it's more nerve-wracking than the Olympics themselves, right? And for us, it's like somebody finishes third and they're like a veteran, and it's like, okay, like, are they retired now? And it's crazy how like careers are you make and break careers in Olympic trials like that, and you get the whole gamut of emotions. It's just insane. So yeah, I love it. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, in 2016, the 21 trials were, obviously just a lot different because everything was so protocoled with COVID. But in 2016, the best media I came out of that trials with was a compilation of filming the reactions when people who made the team, who got first or second, would go through the mix zone, and then they'd be done. And, their whole posse of their support team would be waiting for them there, and they just like run into the huddle and like, hug, be congratulated by them and start crying or start cheering. And like, it's just like a compilation of that. And like, yeah, you don't get that anywhere else, because if you win a national title, that's one thing. If you win an NCAA title, that's one thing. But like, to make an Olympic team, that is the pinnacle of U.S. swimming.
Yeah, and the access can be a little better there than at like the Olympics themselves, where you maybe don't get all of those moments on camera. It's the best.
Yeah, people ask me often like, oh, do you get to go to the Olympics, or and I'm like, no, but like usually I don't. For what I do, which is primarily video, whether on camera or off camera, like it probably wouldn't be worth it because just the Olympics are so. From what I'm told, I've never been to one, but just kind of clustered and very restrictive, and you don't have the access that you would at another meet.
The Olympics are interesting, not to drone on here, but from like a media perspective. So I went to a couple Olympics before I was at NBC, and now I'm at NBC, and I realized how different it is, because at the NBC, like I can have like my own spot in the mix zone, but if I do, I only get the athletes for maybe 90 seconds and they push them along to the next one. Or I can go with like the rest of the written media, where they get the athletes maybe 5, maybe even 10 minutes, but it's a big group of people and you might be able to get one question. And it's like, I have to wait. Okay, do I want to get somebody by myself for 90 seconds, or do I join the big group where I get them for 10 minutes? And that's kind of like the thing you have to weigh. I mean, sometimes I try to get both, but it's, and the athletes, there's like mixed zone fatigue too, right? Because they're stopping so many places, and it's the same questions every time. Like I don't know how like Katie and like people who've been around for so many Olympics, like how they deal with it, because I would just like, my brain would be so fried after like racing and then going like, how was your race? Like 20 different times in 20 different languages. It's insane. And like, the finished product that comes out of it, like watching it on TV and following it that way, is like, it's a lot easier way to digest things. For sure. Like watching Tokyo, it was like, I mean, part of me wanted to be there, but part of me was like, this is like, just like a lot less stressful, like just to be watching and that sort of thing, especially with all the protocols that were in place. It seemed like the journalists who were there just weren't able to get a whole lot out of being there. It just really made it disappointing, because so many great stories can come out of the Olympics when you have the access.
Yeah. And I mean, from one perspective, I get why they are so restrictive, and I'm sure it's pretty crazy, but I agree. I was at Short Course Worlds in Abu Dhabi at the end of the year last year, and comparing being on site there to being at home covering Worlds from home, it's like, it's night and day. Like you said, it's just like, this is so much easier. I sleep in my own bed. I eat my own food. I go to my boss's house and, work for a normal amount every day. And then I go home and like, don't really have to think about anything else.
Yeah.
So
So there are pluses and minuses to each one. Like, it's, and like for relationships, like you want to see the people you're covering in person, to a certain, it doesn't have to be a meet, right? Like when you travel to, you went to like Mare Nostrum in England to do some interviews and stuff like that. Like it's not so much about like being there to cover the actual meet, but just like developing relationships and things along those lines, and showing the athletes that you are invested enough to make those trips. I feel like means a lot, you know, in addition to the great content you guys get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know I enjoy those trips I get to take, and also building those relationships. As part of being, you know, the best journalist or swim coverage guy I can be. But well, Nick, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and chat with us for a while. I know it's getting kind of late where you are, but any parting thoughts before we sign off today?
Not a whole lot. Just like reiterating, I love what you guys do. I'm probably read SwimSwam more than almost anybody else, and I get the podcast every week. I subscribe to it, download it to it. So I really appreciate everything you guys do for the sport. And looking forward to seeing you out in the mixed zone or pool deck sometime soon.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.